DC Comics is really confusing, but I'm here to unconfuse it for you. The past 80 years of comic history can be really daunting for a new reader or even a seasoned vet who wasn't paying attention fully, so I'm going to uncluster the entire history of the DCU. DC Comics has had a few eras, the OG, the Golden Era, then there's the Silver Era, and then the New 52, and so on. Historical revisions to the entire DC multiverse seem to happen often within the narrative. In the 1980s, a series named Crisis on Infinite Earths really became the focal point, the first crisis of the DCU. The heroes learned of a massively terrifying being named the Anti-Monitor. He was so powerful that the right hand of God, the Spectre, and seemingly God itself were completely baffled by this and couldn't really understand his power fully. More revisions happened over time until 2008 and 2009 series Final Crisis was released, which gave us the first real look at the full origin of the entire DC multiverse from the vantage point of the absolute peak of the cosmology, the highest point, the highest realm, the Overvoid, the Monitor Mind. The author says this is the literal comic page being aware of the ink and the text written on it without its permission. The knowledge the Overvoid acquired about this thing called existence within itself was a violation against it, and as a result of feeling infected by it, split off its infected portion of its own being and named it Dax Novu, the first Monitor. This Monitor was tasked with investigating the flaw and mapping it. The Monitor Mind locks the sum of existence, the flaw, in a jar called the Orrery of Worlds, and it's made of divine metals. This final act of the Overvoid interacting with the flaw for the last time had resulted in a massive, metaphoric silent sentinel being formed, a guardian, seemingly now floating in the void, emitting light rays, its function unknown, as it stands firm and tall, seemingly waiting for the moment it will be needed for some cosmic threat to come. During this period, the Overvoid spontaneously generates a race of little monitors as oversight workers, and a monitor hierarchy was formed with Dax Novu, their leader, at the top, and the other monitors being lesser workers. Along with the new monitors, a world of nil is made for them, just to work on safely and oversee the flaw that is now located inside a jar on their world. Dax learns of a substance named Bleed Space, essentially the lifeblood of existence. He begins to feed on it and eventually is extremely corrupted by it. The once divine archangel of the Overvoid, the most radiant and perfect being there ever was, now becoming the monster behind the veil. The leaders of the Council of Monitors and Dax Novu seem to have all agreed that the only way to save existence from Dax Novu himself and his extreme fall into darkness was to lock him in a tomb and tell his wife and family and the other Monitor friends who are not part of the highest council of leaders that Dax Novu gave his life to fend off the cosmic vampire named Mandrakk. In an attempt to save all from existence from himself, Dax Novu willingly began an omniversal battle against his own dark half while in exile in the box. Unknown to his wife Zilovala, a Monitrix and mother to Nyx Wotan, Dax Novu's fall into darkness resulted in the total collapse of his persona of Dax Novu and the emergence of the beast of legend, Mandrakk. During the events of Final Crisis, Darkseid takes over the entire multiverse and corrupts the sum of the DC multiverse with anti-life. Amid this time period, Monitrix Zilovala emerges as an AI sprite of herself in order to contact variants of Superman that are still left in the multiverse below to help her combat the looming threat of Mandrakk and save their Monitor kind from total obliteration, as well as existence itself. A small team of alternate reality Superman variants are carried into Bleed Space and beyond to the peak of the cosmology in the author Avatar's realm of Limbo. Here, Superman learns of a book that contains all the information of existence within it. Touching this book results in a brief rundown of the Monitor race and the origins of the Overvoid, Mandrakk, and a strange visage of a large Sentinel Guardian that looks suspiciously like Superman. Captain Allen, a reality-warping variant of Superman, begins to lose control over his own powers and opens himself up to his full, unlimited power, and instantly bypasses them. His powers begin to flood beyond the infinite. He makes an attempt to contact the Overvoid and seemingly receives a reply. Merging the story of Superman and Ultraman together and hurling this story out of the fictional space into the visage of the Silent Sentinel seems the only way to combat the looming threat of Mandrakk. Only Superman can save us now. The narrative of Superman becomes the pilot for the Cosmic Armor Superman, a visage that always was, always will be. And the ultimate battle for existence never begins, always begins, had already begun, and never formed in the first place, as in this place, the Overvoid and the Whirl of Nil, all form and meaning have no form and meaning. Mandrakk, seething with rage, accidentally kills his former wife Zilovala and blames Superman for the tragic loss. The battle rages and each side adapts to the other on levels beyond understanding. One becomes stronger, the other adapts to become even stronger than that, stronger than the opponent, and vice versa, and onward to infinity beyond any possible measurement of time. Story versus non-story, existence versus non-being, all the is versus all the is not, things versus no things. Story is damaged so severely that it goes blind and reveals an ultimate truth to Mandrakk that allows an impossible win. But this is why Superman was selected to battle the ultimate evil. The embodiment of hope itself has the best chance to invoke an impossible win, where there's no hope of achieving the goal of saving existence against Mandrakk. Only Superman can do this, and only Superman can endow the cosmic armor with the ultimate combative hope factor that will defeat this cosmic vampire, the darkness embodied. Superman within the armor shouts, "You are the corruption of the Monitor. You were Dax Novu. You were the best of them." The ultimate truth harmed Mandrakk worse than anything imaginable and led to his defeat, cast out, and back into the void from whence he came. The very idea of Mandrakk lost to the summary of story and existence itself. After Superman returns home and the defeat of Darkseid finally is complete, the final crisis ended and we begat a new era of the DCU in the Multiversity, which is released in 2014. The cosmology shifted, and a map of the entire multiverse was released so we can get a bird's eye view of existence from the visual standpoint of the Overvoid. However, this map is not reflective of what the cosmology was during the prior events of Final Crisis and before, and we didn't learn why until the end of Dark Crisis' saga in 2022 and 2023. After the Multiversity, many eras of the DCU passed by until the Metal series was released in 2018 and we learn of a dark multiverse, an evil and nightmarish multiverse reflection of the positive, the light multiverse that we know best from the stories of the DCU. Eventually, we learn another horrific truth. A cosmic mother named Perpetua had been locked in the Source Wall, and she made this multiverse by ripping pieces of the Overvoid to form her three sons, Mar-Novu, the Anti-Monitor Mobius, and a secret third monitor named Alpheus the Forger, who would create universes for her on a divine cosmic anvil. While Mar-Novu would protect the light multiverse and monitor it, Mobius the Anti-Monitor would protect the border of the new multiverse from threats beyond within the Overvoid. Fast forward just a little bit and a hellish variant of Batman, named the Batman Who Laughs, acquired far too much power and eventually combats and defeats Perpetua in a battle, re-imprisoning her back into the Source Wall with the remaining pieces of it. Now the Dark Knight fights Wonder Woman, who bathed in the cosmic waters of the Dark Multiverse, the Forge of Worlds, the birthplace of creation. Of course, she wins and defeats him by pushing him into cosmic entropy. Beings from the void, Perpetua's kind, named the Hands, arrive and ask Wonder Woman to join her ranks as cosmic overseers and to help them fight a new looming threat in the Great Darkness that's on its way. She declines, and with the Great Darkness just beyond the horizon, Darkseid consumes the Quintessence and begins his own war against the multiverse, which leads in learning that he is but a small piece of this Great Darkness. Now part of the Dark Army, villains of old spring into action to help the Great Darkness consume the multiverse from the outside and breach it with a literal crack that allows its darkness to seep in. The Great Darkness is defeated by the efforts of the Justice League, cutting off Pariah from his connection to the Great Darkness, just as Dr. Light arrives to quite literally light up the Great Darkness into being meaningless in the grand scheme of things. Afterward, Darkseid forges his own creation named the Absolute Universe, and this goes well for him for some time until we come to the current era of the DCU, known as DCKO. But what happened here? The events of the Perpetual Multiverse and Metal were completely opposite and highly contradictory to the events of Final Crisis, yet they play off and use Final Crisis and Multiversity's comic series as a groundwork and framework. So why were these comics so different? Back in Incarnate 4, it was said that the Great Darkness predated the Overvoid, and the Overvoid was the light within it. Many DC Comics fans thought this was the true history, but it wasn't. It was explained in a few tie-in issues that Darkseid created Perpetua and the multiverse she created as a plot to absorb power and leech it in an attempt to acquire his true form again. It was also confirmed in another tie-in issue called Justice League vs. the Legion that the Great Darkness was never real and was just Vandal Savage using the corrupted energy of a gold lantern ring to trick everybody. During the events of Justice League Odyssey, it's revealed that Darkseid had a plan to use the mythologies within Hypertime to forge a new weapon. Using the Hyper Adapter technology to forge his new weapon, we see a familiar face appear above him, the visage of Perpetua, looming above just as Darkseid explains his new plan and his new weapon and plot. Later, it's revealed that a suspicious flying comic panel is hurling towards Darkseid's secret location in Bleed Space. On that literal flying comic panel is the symbol of Perpetua, and within the boundary of that panel is seen a multiverse, a universe, a window, an illustrative method to show a creation or a window to the universe within. Further still, a series called Secret Files was released, specifically Issue 6, where Psycho Pirate, a being with the ability to escape quite literally any prison, uncovers that the creation he's residing in is only a few months old and not 19 billion years old. He pulls the comic panels down and leaves, revealing Darkseid outside of it and having written his entire creation only just recently. The creation he just escaped from was the multiverse that Perpetua had seemingly been the creator of. Still later, the most significantly important issue that brings all of this together was released during the events of Dark Crisis, called The Dark Army, where the heroes leave the Perpetual Multiverse, which we thought was the DC multiverse that we've been reading about for the last 80 years, and come to a harsh truth. This multiverse resides in Bleed Space, and within Bleed Space is located Mar Novu's original workstation planet, and within that planet is the original Orrery of Worlds, the local 52 universes from the Final Crisis story. The Orrery is locked and sealed and refusing to allow the Great Darkness Army to breach its divine metals. This is extremely confusing, I know. So how can the Orrery of Worlds be located in a separate place than the Perpetual Multiverse, and both are located within Bleed Space? Well, if we go back some issues, Batman uncovers that the current cosmology is essentially the first layer, or a lower layer of what is above them. The top layer of Hypertime exists beyond the greater Omniverse, which they thought was the Overvoid. It turns out that that's not the case, and during the events of Flash: The Big Bang, the Flash goes into the greater Omniverse, which everyone thought was the Overvoid, and the Flash uncovers that the greater Omniverse is nothing more than the lost Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse that we thought the Anti-Monitor deleted during the 1980s comic series with the same name. The Crisis on Infinite Multiverse is the greater Omniverse, and within the center of the Crisis on Infinite Multiverse was another secret multiverse that Darkseid made, a hidden creation called the Perpetua Multiverse. Outside of the false greater Omniverse, the Crisis on Infinite Multiverse is more bleed space and the true realm of hypertime. While on his trek into what Flash thought was the greater Omniverse, he runs into the original Anti-Monitor, who had been out there consuming worlds ever since the last time he saw him. Back in the 1980s Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse series, the Flash died fighting this Anti-Monitor, who now is shocked that the Flash is still alive. The Anti-Monitor here is not the son of Perpetua, but the original version of Anti-Monitor that DC Comics has not actually seen in the last 40 years. The Anti-Monitor is defeated, of course, and later, during the events of the Dark Army, we see that the Orrery of Worlds is completely separate from the Perpetua Multiverse. But how and why? Seems that after the events of Final Crisis, the original Local 52 remained sealed, and we have not seen or read any comics taking place within the original pre-Final Crisis Local 52 since the ending of Final Crisis. But again, you're probably asking why this is so confusing. To speculate, it's because DC wants to move out of the original Prime multiverse of the DCU and move to a new one as its new Prime multiverse. Just as universes exist in the DCU, the Prime Earth Zero, with many variants of Earth Zero around it, DC Comics' first Prime multiverse where the majority of comics took place is now retired. That's the original Orrery of Worlds. The point of this was the Final Crisis, to be the final crisis of that multiverse, that now has no darkness within it. They had 80 years of DC Comics stories within it, and it's now time to let them rest and enjoy their peace that the original Superman fought for in the Final Crisis against Darkseid and Mandrake, all within live in perpetual bliss as Superman won the war and there are no more problems. The resting place is now permanently sealed in the Orrery of Worlds jar. During the events of the Dark Army, the Orrery is seen again, and the Great Darkness wants to invade it because it's not inside of it already. But it can't get in, and the heroes are losing the battle to try to stop the Dark Army from invading. Dr. Light, a being of cosmic radiance, is allowed entry into the Orrery of Worlds for a brief moment, and it instructs her on how to win the battle and unlocks her true power, kicks her out, and locks the door forever behind her so that nobody could ever get back in again. Dr. Light reveals that it was her during the events of Incarnate 4's exposition of the origins of the entire multiverse and the Great Darkness. She was the light. She was the light in the Great Darkness and not the Overvoid. During the finale issues of Dark Crisis, she defeats the Great Darkness with this newfound power that the Orrery of Worlds granted her. The Orrery, recall, is the original divine flaw of existence, the radiant cosmic perfect light that was embodied as a suit of armor made of divine metals. During the events of Final Crisis and prior, this jar, this Orrery, had infinite multiverses with it, and after the events of Final Crisis, we never learned until late 2023 that these multiverses were ejected out of it and now exist outside of it, with only the original Local 52 still inside, locked and sealed forever. This was due to respect for Superman fighting the ultimate evil battle that allows stories to continue. The cosmic armor is all story embodied, the sum of existence, and all not the Overvoid, fighting the worst threat possible, the ending of stories, the delete key, Mandrake. Since Superman won, he and his creation earned their peace and are now locked in the Orrery forever, so let them rest indefinitely. Now, the new Prime history of the DCU belongs to Perpetua and her creation, her multiverse, which again is completely separate from the Orrery of Worlds. The old Prime Multiverse was the orrery, now locked forever. Let them rest. Let the final crisis actually be the final crisis as Grant Morrison intended, the author who wanted it that way. And respect what Superman had to do to accomplish his win for his home multiverse. Now, let them rest forever in peace within the orrery of worlds, safe forever. Now, let DC focus on a new Prime Multiverse, which has a brand new cosmic historical history account and a new creator, and let's enjoy the next 80 years of the Perpetua creation before it too may have to be locked in its own orrery of worlds sometime in the year 2100.